Joining me are two of my colleagues from the Open Repositories Working Group Task Group on Community Building and Engagement. I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Danny, you're muted.
Dana's muted.
Talking away like usual, muted. Dana McFarlane from Vancouver Island University Library.
And I'm Karen Meyer-Klein. I'm from Kwantlen Polytechnic University.
And we also have a couple colleagues joining us today from CRKN, so they'll be speaking later on in the talk. So yeah, part of what the task group on community engagement does is basically do things like this. So we're trying to build a community of repository managers, librarians, people involved in repository work in Canada. And so this is our second community call we've done this summer. We have another one that will be happening in August for those of you running DSpace. We're calling it DSpace Anonymous, so keep an eye out for that community call. And so without too much further ado, I'll just sort of move us along the slides. Oops. Go forward, there we go. So hello again. So basically what we wanted today was, we're in obviously very exceptional times during the pandemic. And so probably for a lot of people, staff roles have changed or shifted, especially with everything moving online or remote work. And so we thought, some places have used this as an opportunity to explore other options for staff engagement, particularly with the repository. And so today, both Dana and Karen are going to be speaking to their own institutions. And so that's from Kwantlen Polytechnic, Karen will be speaking, and Vancouver Island, Dana will be speaking. Following that, we have a couple discussion questions. So we'll use a Google Doc, which I'll put the link in once we get there, where we can share our own, if maybe you've done something interesting at your institution or certain challenges you run into at your institution with trying to do something like this, or other ideas or questions you have. So we'll have that as an opportunity later on. And then, as I mentioned, CRKN will talk about their own work, engaging staff in sort of a remote project, particularly related to the Transcription Project they're doing currently. And yeah, and everyone, please feel free to take a moment and introduce yourselves in the chat so we all get to community build and engage with each other. Yeah, and then we'll wrap up. So 60 minutes, and at any time, feel free to put questions in the chat. And we're recording this, so you will be able to see it afterwards. And we'll make the slides and the document publicly available afterwards as well. So with that, welcome. I'm going to turn it over to Karen.
All right, thank you, Jessica. So what I'll do is I'll just tell you a little bit about how we've been working with the repository during this situation at Kwantlen. So first, is a little bit of background. KPU is a small university which has almost only undergraduate programs, although we are working on graduate programs. And we've had a repository since about 2014, and it started as BE Press. And then since 2016, we're actually on Islandora, and we're part of a shared hosted repository in BC called ARCA. And so our repository is called Cora. Lots of nice acronyms. It has about 400 items. Most of those are citation only. We've had some graduate theses. We've had a lot of OER in there, white papers, that sort of thing. Uptake and use of it, I would say, is limited. It's more like a trickle than a flood. And I've been at Kwantlen since 2016, and I would say that I haven't been able to spend as much time on the repository as I would like. We have a very active publishing program at Kwantlen Library called Opus. Lots of OER development through Pressbooks. We've got journal publishing through OJS. We support our zero textbook cost programs. And all of those arms are very demanding and have a lot of deadlines involved with them, especially the open textbook publishing programs. And so the IR is only like one branch of this publishing program, and it has the least active demand. And so it tends to come last because it doesn't really have any deadlines or have anyone yelling at me to get it done immediately. We do have one library technician, one staff member who has Cora in their job description. That started out as half of their time. They were also half AV, and then all staff members work in public service as well, so they work on the desk. Right now, this is her only functional area. in addition to public service. No other staff members have Quora in their job duty description. And the union doesn't really allow, like they're all unionized, it's awesome, but they don't really allow work that's not in the job description. It's kind of hard to kind of expand on that without a long process. And so she's been working on Quora, but there's no one else available really to help because everyone's already fully booked, you know, and they have lots of work to do, or they're not really suited or interested in learning this kind of new system and doing this kind of work. And so through a variety of reasons, work on our institutional repository has been kind of a slow, long process. We started out with, basically we have a document that the research office sends us, which has all the research citations for all the faculty in it. And we get sent that, and the idea was to put citations in Quora as well to kind of showcase the kind of research that's being done at Kwantlen, and to use it as a kind of an incentive for faculty members to be like, hey, my citation is already in there. Is there also a document that can be attached to this? So it was kind of the idea that we would get more submissions through adding all these citations to Quora as well. And I know adding citations to a repository is kind of a contentious issue, but this is how we have gone about it. And originally, these were also meant as an opportunity for the staff member to actually learn how to use the system and actually get used to like going in and working with it. And so I'd actually expected it to go pretty fast and be done in like maximum of a couple months or something, but she's been working on it for years, and it's been very slow going. It's just kind of gotten stuck. Public service has, before COVID, public service took almost all her time. She was scheduled on the desk a lot. Eventually I managed to arrange that she had one afternoon without desk time where she could actually do some work on Quora. And that was kind of hard actually to arrange that. Work on special projects, even though they're in the job description, it's kind of hard to arrange sometimes. And even so, with that afternoon, the work was very slow going. So we have had very little real like full text additions to the repository. And if there are some, like if we get sent some by email, like theses, or some faculty members who do use Quora quite a bit and send me their articles, usually I just add them because it's faster and easier and I just do it. Haven't done any development on the system for a long time. It's basically just maintenance. And since it's a shared repository, like all the technical stuff is taken care of. And so I can trust that it's online and it's working. I just, nothing new has been happening. And so during the pandemic, so in March, when this all started to go down, KPOs actually stayed open at a very limited basis to provide computer space mostly to students. Very small number of staff are on site, only 2 at a time, and then management. So our library director has been on site all this time. And the person who works on Quora has actually been home completely because she has a health condition which would make it very dangerous for her to contract COVID. And so there is no indication that she'll be going back onto campus this year, basically, like until we actually have a vaccine or this whole situation is resolved. We can expect her to be at home. And for a variety of reasons, she has really struggled to stay motivated to work. Like her home environment doesn't give her the space to work without distractions. Working from home has really been less than ideal. And so we've really talked a lot about what can we do to help her stay motivated. And so one of the things we did was diversifying work. And so I actually got permission to turn her Quora designation into an Opus designation, so wider publishing activity. And that would probably not have happened without the special circumstances of COVID and just the fact that we've struggled to find enough remote projects for staff to do. And the fact that she's not going back into work, so there is no public service work for her. So she's been working on uploading OJS back issues and working on references in Pressbooks. And I would say it hasn't really helped a lot in their motivation. Work has still been very slow, and so and Quora has just basically work on Quora had completely stopped. And so until yesterday, until very recently, that was kind of where the story of Kwantlen would end. And I was like, well, this is a story of failure. Like, actually, there's no other staff that could help me with it, and there's really nothing that I thought we could do. So, but luckily, it turns out that our library staff admin person actually is a library technician. She has a library tech diploma as well. And she hasn't had a lot to do at home because there's just not the same kind of admin stuff for her to do there. And so she's been really wanting to work on something else. And I think because her job description is so different, and she's working as admin staff, and she's not working in like a normal library tech position, but she is completely, like, she has the credentials to do that. She's part of the same union. We were able to offer her some work on Quora, and so I'm extremely excited. And so I literally just had a call with her yesterday to see what we could do. She's very motivated, very gung-ho to do it. And so to learn to use the system, what I've asked her to do is actually upload thumbnails. So basically, I have a whole bunch of citations in the system, and since there are no articles associated with it, no documents attached to it, you get this, the blank folder icon that appears when there's no derivative to be created. And so what we're doing is actually uploading an icon that says citation only or abstract only, so that it's clear what this is, and it's not just some kind of weird blank record or record that has an error. She already did a whole bunch of them yesterday, so I'm excited for how that's going. After that, what I'm going to ask her is to help fix metadata, work maybe on like a faculty CV that we've had, and he sent a large file of basically all his article versions. So large dump where he's like, okay, you figure it out which version of this article we can upload, and I'll agree to any of those. And so I'm really I'm hoping to have her help us do that to see what can be uploaded. And so, yeah, like I said, it only is since yesterday, so I don't actually have any information on how this is going to work in the future. But I do want to say that I'm very happy that I seem to be able to actually get some staff help to help, and that would not have happened without this pandemic and everyone working from home. So silver lining, I guess. Anyway, so that's it for Kwantlen. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to Dana.
Okay.
Right with the slide. There we go.
You're looking for slides, and I'm looking for my notes.
And we should say, if anyone has any questions for Karen or Dana, just put them in the chat.
Absolutely. Okay, so I feel like my remarks today are going to be a bit of a cheat, because how we're engaging staff in IR work at VIU during the pandemic really builds on longer term workflow and workplace changes that in some ways I think you could think of as sort of a slow motion foreshadowing of our present circumstances. But also I feel like that's okay, because right now, don't we all really need to be thinking resourcefully about what we can do with our capacity? And that's a word that I've been thinking a lot about, and I'm going to use many times in the next few minutes. So to set the stage a bit, about 10 years ago at VIU, like in many of your places probably, we began to see in earnest patterns of decline in traditional technical services and public services work related to changing patterns of use of our collections and changing models of collections, acquisition and access. And at the same time, also at VIU, we had something particular going on, which was that we were addressing a newly expanded mandate at our place. We had just become a university in 2008. So that meant sort of a need to look at new functional areas, service areas in the library. including implementing an IR. So in 2010, we implemented DSpace as the IR, and it seemed natural looking at opening that area of service and sort of a new expertise that we needed to be developing, and also the decline in other work, that we would explore the interest and capacity of our existing staff to transfer their skills or reskills for this new work. And they were really excited about it, especially in technical services, and that's where we started to sort of bring people in to this, the new work related to the IR. So at VIU, we work union, and the changes that we made involved staff in the QP bargaining unit. So as we have made changes, we've tried to ask questions and to listen as we've considered changes to people's roles. And we've also tried to be sensitive at all times to communicating any possible workload implications, any expectations about skills. And I think maybe because we've taken care, and also because staff have seen the traditional work going away. Like, they've seen the backlog not being what it was. They've seen the transactions going down. They have been really keen to claim new work. And by this time, by March of this year, they were certainly really actively engaged with not just doing it, but shaping it, being engaged with ways in which we design our workflow, and really taking ownership. So I think it's fair to say that the changes that we have made in recent years have been really favorably met from a bargaining unit point of view. So all of that to sort of set the stage that before pandemic, technical services staff, certainly at our place, were engaged in IR projects such as digitization, transcription, cataloging and Dublin Core, administrative work related to researching author rights, managing embargoes, uploading files, managing versions. And I should probably clarify that in our IR, we have sort of the ETDs, preprints, postprints sort of business, but we also have digital special collections. So they've got both sorts of work that they're engaged with, both sorts of content. And they're doing this work in addition to, and sort of evening out their traditional technical services roles in acquisitions and serials, particularly, which they maintain. So there's sort of peaks and valleys in that activity, and they're working the IR work to sort of even their workload. Also, before the pandemic, we had some public services staff who were engaged in supporting digitization, OCR, and transcription projects as well in their off-peak shift times. And these folks were folks who really stepped forward out of interest and the desire to be busy and engaged. For example, we have a campus where there's lower traffic, but a need to maintain service hours. And there was a lot of interest, there has been a lot of interest at that campus in, again, in new work, in ways to contribute. So IR related projects have been a really good fit there. Now, since most of our staff at VIU Library have been work at home since March, with just a few people on site keeping continuity services happening, technical services staff have been able to continue on the foundation that we have in place with independent IR related projects as their home circumstances permit them to do that. And we've been able to facilitate them doing that by providing them with equipment that they may need if they don't have that at home, and also by supporting them in flexible approaches. So for example, we have a staff member who has little twins, and she works when she can. So that means she has to work early. I think she gets started at 6 or 7 in the morning. And we have another staff member who has no internet connection. She never has. She's doing transcription and some other work, and she works from a local drive. So, you know, we just think these things through and we try to be flexible and work with what people can do with their capacity. In ordinary times, we have seasonal layoffs at VIU Library due to our low summer and spring enrollment. So that's happened this year as it always would, but we've also just sustained some extraordinary layoffs due to the pandemic. And these affect library frontline staff, some of them due to foreseeably reduced open hours. We're hoping that we can continue to engage ongoing staff in our institutional repository projects according to the capacity that they can put to that, according to their skills and interest. And we're also hoping that in fall, we may be able to support returning staff in resuming or in exploring for the first time this kind of work that they can engage in from wherever they may be. And that is all I have to say in the way of remarks, but happy to field any questions.
Thanks, Dana. Anyone questions for Lise, sorry, Karen or Dana? Yeah, and I agree with you on. I agree with Jordan's comment. Yeah, I mean, probably a lot of you work in unionized environments, and so that obviously makes things. You have to be aware and have a lot of, as Jordan put, nuanced engagement. So I think that's a very great comment. So now is the time for. Oh, here I've got a question from Tara. What training was available for staff transitioning to IR digital work? So Dana or Karen, do you have any comments on transitioning staff into this kind of work?
Yeah, for us, so far it's been really, because it only just started and it's kind of ad hoc. It's not as well established and well thought out as Dana's what Dana was describing. So right now it's just been one-on-one training. So we've just done it on Teams. There's a variety of asynchronous training materials available and how to use Islandora and how to use ARCA specifically. So I've provided that as well. And mostly it's just, I would say it's just one-on-one at the moment.
Yeah, ad hoc is a good way to describe what we've done as well. And the training has really been sort of just in time and needs driven. So if we're exploring, for example, a particular process or technology that we need for digitization, then we will we'll usually try to attack it in-house, right? Rather than sending people out or doing formal courses. We do a lot of figuring things out and then training staff, like train the trainer kind of stuff. Working on internal documentation, building documentation together. Does that answer the question?
Great, thank you. So you can see Karen just shared a Google Doc. Let me know if anyone can't open it. I hope that's a public link. I think I gave you a public link. Yeah. So now we have a time for basically everyone else to share experiences. So maybe you've been doing something interesting at your institution with engaging staff. Maybe you haven't, and what are some of the challenges in trying to do this work? Yeah, so why don't we take a couple minutes and just let people start to share any examples or any challenges you're facing. And as I said, if you're having trouble accessing the link, just let me know in the chat, and I'll fix that up. And I should say, I know as we start chatting, I'll look ahead. I know at McGill, one of the challenges we had was partly union, that you have to be very aware and cognizant of the roles and the tasks and what's in the collective agreement. And so, it's been delicate, right, to give people new positions or give them new work that may not be within their job category. And so that was something that we found as a challenge, but also the potential that, you do all the training, we mentioned training, and then, okay, in 2 or 3 months, they're not doing it. And you've invested a lot of time and energy, potentially, into training staff that may not want to be doing the work or may not have an aptitude for the work or an interest. And then, you go back to normal, and then, you've returned to the earlier situation.
Jessica, I think the link may not be public because several people don't have access to it.
Yeah, I'm gonna do this now. Why is it restricted? Change to anyone with the link. Copy link. You can see my face like looking.
Jessica, I think you need to make it an editor.
Oh yeah.
Oh, there we go. Sorry. Hi everyone. I thought maybe I'd made really bad questions. Okay, so it's the second one. I know there's 2 links there now. I'm going to type a space and then repaste there. Is that better, everyone?
I think it is.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone. There we go. All right. So we've got some interesting examples from Waterloo. We learned about the new workflows, immediate deposit service. Yeah, so I'm just gonna give everyone a couple minutes to, sorry about that, to start sharing any, your examples and your challenges.
Whenever I see people type, that staff is doing the processing of receiving PDFs for faculty, I'm just like, it's like my dream situation that 1, faculty send PDFs, and 2, that there's people that can actually process them and deal with them. It's like this, I don't know, it's my dream, working towards that.
Yeah, CV scraping, that was one idea we came up with too, was, we have quite a few, say, Canada research chairs or people who get big grants at McGill. And so, okay, maybe we go to the big people's CVs and see which one of them we can make open access. And then yeah, that was one idea we had as well.
Is it okay if I share?
Yeah, please do.
Okay. Thanks. Lindsay from Mount St. Vincent University.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just all typed out today. So it was actually when we first closed in mid-March, it was actually kind of, well, a blessing and a curse in many ways, but because all of our access services folks are library technicians, they essentially had lost at least half of their work. I was kind of, I think, leaned on a little bit to provide some sort of work for them. So there's always a backlog, given that we're a very small university and a small library, so it's really just me. So I was able to create a lot of different workflows, and I had at one time, I think, about 6 different people working on the IR in some fashion. Some of it was metadata cleanup, some of it was ingesting content, some of it was working on subjects issues. There's a whole host of projects I had going on. But then our university, and maybe it's unique to us, but our university basically rolled out a voluntary layoff program for the summer where staff could maintain their salary if they took a combination of the CERB, and the university would then top up to their regular salary. So in one fell swoop, I lost all of them, basically. And because I am just the one person, all of those projects had to be put on hold, and they are still on hold. So it was kind of bittersweet to have a lot of momentum happening at the beginning, and now it's actually worse than it was before COVID-19.
That's a really interesting scenario that happened. Do you think there's any potential in the fall when people return for them to integrate this back into their work?
I hope so. We are not, we're going all online this fall. So, and the library will be open very minimally. So I'm hoping that once the access services staff are back working full time, I will be able to keep at least a couple of them on some part-time work to continue those projects.
Thank you for sharing, Lindsay. That's a really interesting, I don't mean, it's an interesting story of using staff and all the changes that continue to happen. Is there anyone else who would rather speak to their particular scenario or have something, an example in particular they'd like to share, they'd like to speak to other than type to? All right, let's just take a look at how we're doing here. All right, creating training. I see another CV repository project. Yeah, so we're looking to do some population of the repository. I see that from Guelph. And I should also say, if anyone sees a project in there that you think is really interesting and want to know more about, please also feel free to put that in the chat and say, oh, hey, UBC, what do you, can you talk a little bit more to that? That's something we've been interested in doing. All right. I'm just gonna scroll down to some of the challenges. Oh, Waterloo, welcome. I understand this, helping catalogers lower their standards. I feel that. Yeah. Oh, that's interesting, doing some staff transcribing. Oh, yeah, and we ran into that when we digitized what Dalhousie did. We digitized our theses and dissertations going back to, I think, 1830, and we had some older content as well that was, as you say, sensitive. Quality control, I see that from UBC. Yeah, that's often a concern, especially when you say open up the repository to people who may not be normally trained or normally have an interest or an engagement with it. So how do you, keep a certain level and not introduce new problems? Like that definitely can always be a fear. Yeah, higher level of expertise or decision making needed. And that depends too on your staff and what their positions are as well.
Can I ask, I'm just reading UBC's answer on their the first question. So 1G, they said building teams with the liaison librarian, a supervisor and a staff member requesting permissions and content, in some cases doing upload. I'd love to learn more about that, whether that's every liaison librarian having their own staff member working with that, or it's one staff member working with various liaison librarians, and then how does that work? How's that going?
Hi, this is Tara Stevens-Kite from UBC. There's actually two of us here. My colleague Amber Sondry is also here. But I've been primarily working on the business end doing content recruitment. Right now, we only have two models of this team system working. So one is working with a specific liaison librarian in the Department of Psychology who's really engaged in this work. And then she also, again, we were a bit lucky. She happened to have a staff member who was also really interested and engaged and had a base level of skills in digital work. So we just needed to build out the other administrative skills for author rights and DSpace upload. We are hoping to use this as kind of a model to show other liaison librarians how easily it can be done. But the only other example we have where this has worked is when there has been a specific research grant project involved. So you might have, some of you may be familiar with Making Research Accessible, which is a project with the Learning Exchange aimed at collecting research related to Vancouver's downtown east side. So I find that it's only worked where we had that really unique combination of either someone who's really engaged and has a capacity or someone who's motivated and supported by research grant funding.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very interesting. That's a really interesting example. Does anyone else have any other, see anything else you'd like to ask other people in the group to talk a little bit more to? We've got lots of really, really interesting examples coming up, I see, in this list. We've made it to almost a J. Let's see. Yeah, and reporting structures is difficult, right? Because you might have staff that are, I see this from you, Ottawa, that are, they don't report to you, right? They report to someone else. And so you're trying to collaborate or cross work with them and their supervisor. And that can kind of be a tricky relationship to navigate.
I'd love to add to that as well. So at Kwantlen, there are only a couple librarians that I think are working directly with staff. And even there, I'm not actually sure that whether we are allowed to give assignments or feedback or anything to do with staff. It all has to come through their own supervisors. And I'm still learning about this. I'm kind of new to this kind of setup. And so I keep making mistakes where I'm like asking them to do something. And then they're like, oh, you have to go through these 3 other people. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. And I know absolutely why that is. And I really support that. But at the same time, it's like, okay, it's kind of hard to move anything along when you're not actually allowed to say anything to anyone, really. So that's been a very interesting challenge as well.
Thanks, Karen. And I see Lindsay here put a comment in. I'm curious to hear from folks who are doing CV scraping projects. What does that workflow look like? Is there anyone who'd like to speak to that? I think I saw Guelph mention they're doing some CV scraping. Is anyone who'd really just speak to their process at their institution?
Hi, this is Chris from not from UBC. Sorry, I worked there many years ago. From Guelph. We're in the early stages of it, and basically what we want is everything published by everybody who works faculty to begin with, but we'll have to go after other things later. It's pretty ambitious, and we're, that's the target, and we are cognizant of the fact that we're going to have to start with the first 5 years, and we're going to have to start with probably a small department as a pilot, and that's the next step. But retraining and having a clear workflow, we don't know what we're doing. So once we figure that out, then we can actually offer a pathway for folks. But yeah, some of the challenges around that are completeness right now, and also just getting the right version from faculty members. They're not super motivated to put stuff into the repository. And now we have a mediated repository, so we can do the work, and we want to do the work, but we are hoping we will get buy-in in the fall and have everybody up and trained by then, for the folks who won't be going back into the library, whoever those might be. So does that answer the question? That's a brief outline of what we're doing.
Pat from Carleton.
Yeah.
Similar kind of thing. We're doing some CV scraping, but we usually tie it to a particular research unit rather than a departmental unit, and often sort of tying it into either a grant application or a grant reporting cycle. So they're a little more motivated, but it is that sort of buy-in. We did some departmental level ones, but we found that the dean or the department chair may have been keen, but that did not necessarily translate down to the individual faculty members. And at some point you have to be talking to the faculty members and say, so what was the license agreement that you signed on this?
Oh, Pat, so naive. I'm kidding.
I'm trying to keep us on the happy side of the faculty. We could do it, It's one of those things of, we could find that for you and do it to you, but we'd rather do it with you.
Very good. I like that.
I think we're actually taking the opposite approach. I think we're just going to do it all, and then so we're going to do it and not make it public, and then ask permission afterwards. And say, can you have a look at this list and see if there's anything here that looks incomplete or odd, or we've already got it, it's ready to go, and if you put your thumbprint here, we'll push go.
Yeah, that kind of confirmatory approach has worked well. But we sort of want to get them on, we've been trying to get them on board at least a little bit beforehand. Say, hey, we're going to do this, do the work, come back with them, and then confirm.
Thank you both, Christopher and Pat, for talking to your particular experiences. It sounds to me, I'm going to talk to my colleagues Karen and Dana, but I think we should have a workflow. I think we should have a workflow call. I think that would be really interesting. I think that came up out of our last community call as a topic, and I'm hearing that now too. Yes, please, says Lindsay. Okay,
yeah,
all right,
for sure.
We can make that happen.
That'd be great.
All right, so because we have our guests here also from CRCan to talk to their own experiences trying to coordinate a sort of a remote work project, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give the floor over to them. Those of you can still feel free to, if you have other comments you want to put in the doc. And as I said, we'll be able to share the document afterwards if you want to add anything. But I'm going to move over to Francesca Berzecchi, who is a communications coordinator from CRCan, and Emily Laballe-Fonston, who is member services and licensing, to speak a little bit to their particular project of, coordinating remote work amongst many people. And Francesca and Emily, do you have your microphones on or?
Yeah, mine should be on.
Perfect.
I should be here too.
Perfect. All right, please go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the project that CRKN has had going since about the end of June, which is our pilot transcription project. So this project really got started back in April when we heard from a couple of institutions who had staff in the same position as you've all been discussing, who weren't able to carry out all of their normal tasks during the lockdown. And they were interested to know if CRKN had any projects that they could, that staff at their institution would be able to support. So the first thing that came to mind for us was a crowdsourced transcription project. We have the Heritage Collection, which is our sort of companion to Canadiana Online, and it's quite large. It has, oh, my sound is cutting out, says Tara. I apologize. I'll try to slow down and see if that helps. If it gets bad enough, then I will hand it over to Emily or Jason Friedman, who's also on this call. Sorry about that. So yes, we had this idea for a transcription project because we have this collection. It's quite large. It's 41 million pages of digitized archival documents from Library and Archives Canada, and most of them are handwritten documents. So the typical optical character recognition technology that you can use for typewritten documents doesn't work for these, just because handwriting, as you might know, is so different, and so that doesn't work. And currently the only really feasible method for getting transcriptions and certain kinds of metadata for these documents is to do a manual transcription of them. And this seemed like the perfect opportunity to kind of launch that project. So the first thing that we did is we sent out a short survey to the membership to see what the interest and ability level was among institutions. And we also threw out a couple of other ideas of projects that they might be interested in. And we really found that the interest level and ability was generally quite high. Even institutions that couldn't participate thought it was an interesting choice. And they were mostly interested in transcription versus the other projects that we suggested. So at CRKN internally, we kind of got together a group pretty quickly and started working to build this. And we were really fortunate to be able to work with Our Digital World, who is one of our associate members. And they're an organization here in Ontario that does, they support local digitization initiatives. And they had an already built tool that they kind of loaned to us. And we worked to adapt it to better fit our needs. We created a French interface for it and updated the guidelines and the help text. And we tested it internally, and we were also able to test it with the University of Ottawa. So that was an interesting way to bring in one of our local members and have them contribute to the development of the project, because they did a lot of useful testing for us right before launch. And we launched right at the end of June, and since then it's been really positive. We've heard a lot of great comments from participants saying that, you know, they're enjoying the work and finding it interesting, and so uptake has been pretty good. I think we have staff from about 12 institutions that are participating. And it's really, I think, been an interesting change of pace for CRKN as well, because I don't think we've really done something so interactive in the past. So we've definitely had to change gears a little bit and think about how we can support staff at these institutions who are working at a distance on something they may have never done before. And historical documents do pose their own set of challenges as well. So I'm going to hand it over now to Emily to talk a little bit more about the support resources that we've developed and how we're working with participants. I hope that everyone can hear me okay. I apologize for my audio, but off to Emily now.
Thanks, Francesca. Yeah, I'm going to pick up on something that Francesca kind of casually slid in there, which is that this all started from members reaching out to us And so when we decided how we were going to kind of make sure that members felt supported in participating in this project, we kind of saw that in two ways. In the first, that we needed to be doing communication at the higher level of the institution. So reaching out to our directors, university librarians, et cetera, pitching them the project, how it would work, how it would contribute to greater discoverability for the collections, enhance the resources for the research community, and make sure that that buy-in, so to speak, at the high level was there, so that when it came time to engage with the personnel of the library who were going to be working on this project, they had supported their own institutions for committing time to this. And that meant necessarily that we were going to have to be a little bit flexible with what we were looking for in terms of a time commitment. We don't have any particular minimum requirements. Institutions are invited to participate as they can. So in some cases, that's a single member of staff who's expressed an interest. We have some institutions where they have a number of staff working on it. That creates a really interesting dynamic at their own end as well. So we are also varying the content that's available for transcriptions. As Francesca mentioned, there's 41 million pages in the Heritage collection. It's going to take us a little bit of time to transcribe them all. So we're encouraging members to start with collections that are of interest to their research focuses at their own institutions. So we've been really good about reaching out to, for example, one of our institutions in Atlantic Canada is participating, and they've had a great interest in Acadian history. So we've been able to find some archival fonds that work for them more particularly. And then at the same time, since we are working with individual participants who have their own personal interests, when it comes to which image you're working on or which phone you're starting with, that's entirely left up to participants. So we've put material out there that fits research needs that Library and Archives Canada have indicated to us, that our own research community has communicated to us, that our members have communicated, but then we're leaving it up to the participants to kind of let their own interests guide them. We've modified our guidelines, tried to make them as clear and concise as possible. We are working with a tool that is very intuitive. That means it's a lot quicker for staff to get into the process. There isn't a huge learning curve, so definitely more accessible for folks to participate on. And then one of the things I think has been really, really positive is we've had engagement both in our drop-in office hours. So we do weekly office hours on video chat. Francesca and I grab a cup of tea, sit down with some of our participants, and just kind of chat about maybe some transcription questions they've got or interesting finds they've had. And then we also engage with members asynchronously in a Slack channel. So we've created a Slack workspace for the Transcription Project. And that means that as and when a participant comes across something of interest or a challenge, they can reach out, and there's usually one of us there to get back to them kind of right away. And it also allows them to engage directly with each other. So we do have an email address. They can reach out to us by email if there's any issues. But what we're really hoping to do is a little bit of community building kind of across Canada, which is a really big goal. But with members participating at all these different institutions on the same kind of project with the same resources, it's an ability to collaborate with colleagues that you maybe wouldn't have a chance to interact with otherwise. And we're sort of seeing some of those people from the Slack channel also in the office hours. We're also seeing different people in both spaces, and that's really great. We're happy to be providing different mediums for folk to engage in the project. I think the only other thing really that we wanted to mention was part of what we've done is create a transcriber role, which is what the majority of folk are doing, and also a reviewer role. And so what that's done is not only are we ensuring that the metadata we're getting has a peer review process to it, so it's all going to be the better for that at the end, but we're also supporting the participants in saying, you don't have to get it right 100% of the time. Francesca was perhaps being kind when she said that some of these historical documents are a little more challenging. Some sections of text can definitely be completely illegible, particularly if you were unfamiliar with historical documents. Some of the handwriting can be definitely challenging. And knowing that there's somebody else kind of coming along behind you that you can leave you know, we've got notation markers for, I have a question about this text, etc. And your reviewer can come through and kind of back you up on that. It's really just, it's helping members or participants to feel that they can do their best and that doesn't have to be 100% transcribed. And that's been really good. We've had people tell us that that is kind of an encouraging thing, like just a little bit of a bump up that, you know, you'll get more familiar, but even your beginning stuff is being checked over. And that's helping us to really drive home the message that anything they can contribute is welcome. At the end of the day, all of this is going to increase discoverability. It's going to help the research community. And that's what this project is for, is to give members a chance to contribute there. And so we're really excited about what we've been able to do. If there's other suggestions and things like that, please, you know, feel free to share them. But yeah, that's kind of how we've been thinking about that support and engagement piece when it comes to the transcription project, which is almost 4 weeks in now.
Thank you so much, Francesca and Emily. Does anyone have any questions for them about working with staff? Because this is sort of interesting because they're not just staff from, say, one institution. You're working with lots of different people from lots of different places. Okay. Thank you so much again for sharing that. So basically, I mean, we're good for time, 2:53, well, 2:53 Eastern time. I know you are all spread across Canada. So basically, I just wanted to take one last look at our document because I realized now I forgot to check out what was working well in everyone's scenario. Yeah, having great staff on board and having people engaged. And that sounds like what's happening with the CRKN project. We found people who have an interest and a desire. And so that's been something that's been really positive, is when you find people who have been maybe looking for something and now they've something new or interesting to learn or do. And then this has maybe given them an opportunity to do something. Oh, I like this rebel contribution from, look at all these rebel contributions. Oh, this is great. Oh, interesting. You all are doing a new workflow particularly for COVID. So maybe we can, maybe we can get you guys on for that workflow call. I think that would be really interesting. And I think people might like to hear a little bit more about that. And it sounds like Carleton has some interesting ones related to COVID as well. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or anything else they'd like people to speak to or talk to before we wrap up for the day? I see that from Saskatchewan. Yeah, that's great that you're finding that to be such a positive, that they're working on the transcription project's been positive for them. Okay. Jeanette, early days yet? Well, it's all early days for everyone, Jeanette. All right. Well, if anyone, no one has any other comments or questions, I mean, we're going to make the document available. So as I said, if you saw something, you saw someone posted that was really interesting, or you want to learn more about what someone's doing, feel free to reach out. Everyone was very kind enough to put the institutions they're working at. I want to thank everyone again for being a really meaningful discussion, being really participatory. I think that's what's made these community calls work so well, is that everyone just seems to like get right in there. I'm sure you were also frustrated when you couldn't get in on that Google Doc. So thank you again for joining. As I said, the recording will be made available, as will we'll probably massage the community call document into something like a synthesis or a summary document. All right, so thanks everyone.
And thank you, Jessica, for leading us along.